Hello, everyone, and welcome to Overtime. With me today is Christopher Mowdy. Mowdy, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you. So, yeah, a lot going on, and we're going to put in the, I think in the main window here, we're going to put in some of the latest footage. We've got more footage of all sorts of things to come up. This one in particular, and actually, I think this is some kind of armored vehicle that saw a civilian car going the other way and just went over and drove right over it. Obviously, you can't hold the entire Russian army responsible for what one person does, but there are reports of, we can see the car and the vehicle just goes out, runs over it. The man was okay, actually. We'll see footage of him getting rescued, and there's some more footage. We'll get into that. Right now, what we're looking at is there is anticipated to be a massive attack on Kiev. There was what appeared to be a massive attack. We don't know if it was repelled or they stopped. We do know that Putin is claiming that he has slowed down his attacks in order to give them a chance to negotiate, but he hasn't come to the table. They've been asking him to, and he won't. The thinking is this is a lie. He's just saying this because this is going actually very poorly for him, and he wants to find some cover on that front.
Oh, he was expecting it to be a blitzkrieg.
Well, exactly. Well, he said as much more than once. Well, let me get you. I'll work on getting your camera up there in a minute. Let everybody see that face. Our sub count will just go up dramatically if we can get your camera on there. So
it'll make me fucking puke in my own mouth.
All right. So the EU Commission leaders, France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States have sent a joint statement asking for the removal of certain Russian banks from the SWIFT system. We will discuss that. I have only kind of an ancillary knowledge of that, but we'll discuss at the minimum what I know. It actually is pretty damaging to the U.S. to do this in terms of economic damage to the U.S. and to Russia. It's considered to be reasonably equivalent, but they can't absorb it the same way we can at the current point. But the thinking was that they figured we'd never pull the trigger on it because it hurts us. And 48 hours ago, we said we wouldn't. Now it looks like we will. This has been described as the nuclear option for sanctions. More than 150,000 troops now appear to have been amassed, that had amassed in Ukraine now. The vast majority, let me rephrase that, sorry, it was about 175,000 who massed around Russia. We believe now 150,000 are in the country. Russian forces have killed at least 198 people, including children, 3 children. Over 1,000 people, including 33 children, have been wounded, according to the Ukrainian National Guard. More than 150,000 Ukrainians have fled, with more still leaving. Let's see. Russia is apparently experiencing significantly heavier losses than they had anticipated. This includes armor, aircraft. It turns out that the Russian, we had said earlier that we believed that the Ukrainian Air Force was gone and was not effective. Guess what? That's not entirely true. So it looks, I don't know where they're coming from, but they are back in the air and they are fighting, and Russia has yet failed to get air superiority in Ukraine. Obviously, it's an absolutely desperate situation, but it's they're holding on. Oh, that's why. Sorry, just one technical issue here. It apparently insists that despite the fact that this is obviously a stream, it's not going to let me start Mowdy's portion without him getting a warning that he might be recorded during. I think Mowdy knows he might be recorded during this.
Oh no!
Yeah, it's over. Game over, man. All right.
What are you trying to do?
So, all right. We do know also that they've hit a oil refinery or oil pipeline. We'll get into that. We'll show you on the map where they are, and we have footage of all of that. This was what appears to be a general. A Russian commander named fucking Badass or something like that, who basically just walked up to a tank and started shooting at it. They're a little pissed over there. So I don't know. That's what's going on. So Marty, how you doing? What's the good word? Where do we stand as far as you know?
Well, that's a good question. You guys are definitely keeping up on this way more than I am. I've had my nose buried in books and lectures for most of the day, and I saw that you had your breaking news moments, and then your correction, and then the CNN. What's funny is, as I was telling Shanna about the CNN faux pas that you had to correct, she understood it as the correct story. She's like, "Yeah, I saw that on CNN. They're sending it to Romania, to the surrounding countries." I was like, "Yeah, well, at least one time they advertised it as this very clickbaity title." So I thought that was kind of like an interesting take, because I guess depending on where you're accessing CNN, the story was presented differently. But that is, the fact that you were able to correct it as quickly as you did.
Yeah, I'm
was it Fabio? Fabio pointed that out.
That was Fabio, and he actually picked it up in the live chat. But we can't just, when somebody puts it in the live chat, we're like, okay, we'll check it. But we can't check it during and we checked it. And again, it's at the end of the story. It says they're sending it to Ukraine. It explicitly says it's going to Ukraine. But if you read the text of what he said, so this is nobody knows yet. Ukraine is saying that this was artillery from Russia. Russia is saying they believe it was anti-aircraft, which missed its target and struck an apartment building. Believe it or not, there were 6 injuries, no killed. We're going to show pictures. This is the apartment building right here. Actually, I'm going to put that in the overlay. That's the apartment building. You're seeing it get struck here. It has utterly gutted at least one apartment and pieces of ones above and below it. 6 injured, no killed. But the Ukrainians are saying that this was actually deliberate, and that they are deliberately stepping up attacks against civilians in an attempt to get them so afraid that they'll surrender. He needs this to end quickly. At this point, the estimate is if this lasts longer than 10 days, he's actually at risk of losing significant power and maybe even getting kicked out of government. There are people starting to get extraordinarily upset about this in Russia. We have reports of mass surrenders.
Is that a thing?
I know there was a small group that did surrender. This mass that was a while back, and there is no evidence.
Well, hold on a second. No, I mean, like you're saying that they could kick Putin out of government?
Well, how or what that would look like is questionable. So here's what we've got. He is surrounded by a bunch of oligarchs. They don't like him. They don't dislike him per se. But they're not there because they love him. They're there because he makes them rich.
It's the dumpster fire analogy, right?
Yeah.
Dozen dumpster fires.
Yes. They just want the money and they want the power. So a number of them are ex-KGB just like him. Some of them assassins just like him. They have no loyalty to anybody per se, but he's kept them rich. The problem is now, especially with the SWIFT thing, well, a lot of them are starting to lose money. And if Putin starts to lose support for this... Unpack
the SWIFT thing.
All right, SWIFT. So I forget what SWIFT stands for. It's an acronym, but it is a hyper-fast communication system between banks. And any communication that goes from one bank to another, for the most part, to the best of my understanding, uses SWIFT. Now, this includes, but is not limited to, obviously, transactions, but any other kinds of communications above and beyond transferring money use this SWIFT protocol. Now, the SWIFT communication system. Russian banks, even though they have been sanctioned, still have had access to this and have been able to send, if not transaction information or very limited transaction information that isn't covered by those sanctions, they've still been able to communicate with other banks and fulfill obligations and do whatever else it needs to do. If they are eliminated from that, then even if there were legitimate bank transactions that they had to do, their banks could not communicate with any banks in the West. The central communication hub they would be cut off from. Now, the problem is there is still legitimate reasons for people to be either trying to get money out of Russia or investments that people have that they're trying to divest or whatever, and all of that would be ground to a halt. There are... I think it was that's the rocket. They've had to now, it looks like, halt their space program, or not halt, but slow it down because of supply issues. But that's a different one. So as of this moment, if they get pulled out, that does actually wreak some havoc for the U.S. I forget the exact numbers. I should look into them. I'll try to do that later in the show. But it's actually not good for the U.S. to pull them out because we still do have certain transactions that are not covered by the sanctions that need to be done, and that would all stop at this point now. And 48 hours ago, the U.S. said, no, we're not going to do it. And now every major EU Commission leader and the U.S. has said we're pulling them from it. And I think Putin sort of figured we wouldn't do that because it's kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face. But I think everybody's just about had it. Now, once that's done, none of these oligarchs can even transfer their money from rubles to dollars, or if they have dollars stowed away somewhere, they can't get it back. They can't get it back. None of the banks are going to have access, again, even not for non-sanctioned transactions. This completely cuts them out of the entire economic market of every other country basically on the planet. It's a staggering move, and it looks like they've now committed to it. So now this is a huge problem for the oligarchs because they do have money stored away. They have even private money. Most of them have been sanctioned. YouTube had been violating the sanctions. It turns out YouTube has been allowing Russian media and their channel to continue to be monetized. It was a Democratic senator, I forget which one, actually a Democratic congressman, one of the two, who notified the Justice Department and sent a letter to YouTube and said, are you aware that you've still got them monetized in violation of sanctions? That has been corrected. They are now blocked by YouTube from broadcasting in Ukraine. A number of their channels have been demonetized. All of their channels are now out of the loop for any kind of recommendations on the algorithm, although some of them are still being allowed to stream. But this includes all of the Alphabet products. So that would be YouTube, Instagram. Facebook has done something similar. So we can get into the nitty-gritty of that. But that's why one of the reasons that they try to stick to dollars. So here's a soft currency. Russian currency is a soft currency. It's extremely unstable. It moves around a lot. They don't like it. They'll take on the black market. If you just go to Russia and you have dollars, you can usually buy and sell things for those dollars at a much better rate than the actual exchange rate. And the reason is because Russians know that exchange rate isn't stable, so they prefer a hard currency. All the oligarchs, anybody with any power there, actually has their money saved in dollars, but they need to be able to transfer those to rubles when they need money. How or where they've got this money, I assume they've got most of it in places that are reasonably sanction-proof, and he has worked very hard to sanction-proof his economy. And we can get into some of the numbers there. I've got an article on what we're looking at for the actual blow to the economy. But this means even the transactions that don't fall under the sanctions are now almost impossible because none of the Russian banks can communicate now except by letter, essentially. Maybe email to people if they need to, but they're not going to be communicating to the other banks. I'm sorry, what?
Carrier pigeons.
Carrier
pigeons. Signals.
Smoke signals, exactly. So it's a staggering blow, especially to these oligarchs. Now, these oligarchs, we actually tried to get these oligarchs to assassinate him when he took Crimea. The original package of sanctions went to the oligarchs, not to him, knowing full well that they had no compunction about killing him. They just hadn't done it as long as he's more useful than not. His usefulness is waning. His power is waning. And at some point, they will find a way to replace him if he does not fix this, and he's fully aware of that. If this had gone quickly, and if he could provide the Donbass, which has a lot of food and other natural resources, if he could provide the river and at least a third of Ukraine as a present to the oligarchs, everything would have been okay. And the thinking was he could do that. At this point, it's been multiple days in. We believe what the intelligence, U.S. intelligence, is saying is that they did not supply their army for anything longer than a week. And they're going to be exceeding that at this point, and they haven't gotten anywhere, so they're having supply line issues. Those supply lines are getting harassed by the Ukrainians. They're unable to meet them, and we do know at least a small number, a very small number, have in fact surrendered and said, we were told we were engaging in humanitarian aid in Donbass, not we were going to come into the capital and start shooting people.
Has that been corroborated?
Yes, that's been corroborated, but that was in the first 24 hours. There's a story that like a whole platoon did that, and that has not been corroborated. corroborated. We have absolutely no real evidence of that. We have the imagery and footage of the first group that had arrested, and they spoke with some of them, and they were just tied. They were uniformed. Russian uniform, they're on their bellies, and they just took the ties on their backs, said, yeah, we surrender. We weren't here to fight you guys. So we also actually believe at this point that there is a chance, and I kind of given that we already just did a correction, but this is also, there was a story about Snake Island. Snake Island had, if I recall, 16 Russians. We played the footage of that with the audio. Russian warship comes on and says, tells them to surrender. It was the border guard that had Snake Island, and they replied, "Dear Russian soldiers, fuck off." And then a massive shelling of the island is what we've been told happened, and all the lives were lost. They're saying now they believe that these men may have survived and may be prisoners of war. I have no idea why they're saying that, but that's also coming from a credible news source that they believe at this point they may in fact still be alive. How or where that mix-up happened, we're going to say fog of war again and all that other good shit. But if I don't know what's going on, what I do know is, so this is actually, I did want to show this. So this is, and there's obviously a profound argument over this. So this is what you're about to see is some kind of missile or rocket striking an apartment complex in Kiev. This happened, I think, earlier today, if I recall. That's the strike. Ukraine is saying that was deliberate and that was Russian. Russian is saying that it was anti-aircraft missile that missed its target and attempting to shoot down a MiG hit the apartment complex. That's the apartment complex there from another view. But I mean, this is battling happening in a modern urban city, obviously. So this is what's going to happen. We also have reports that a kindergarten was struck. Now, this is CNN, who is admittedly a little bit on my shit list right now. But there's the apartment, and it's what we're told now is only 6 injuries. Oh, that seems to have, why did that blow out there? I don't know. So we're told 6 injuries, no casualties. So that's good. It's also just a complete miracle when you take a look at what exactly the damage to that. I mean, if you take a look at that, that's one entire apartment gone, and significant damage to the one above it and below it, and 6 injuries, no fatalities at least last we saw. So that's good. And then to take a look at the map, I'll get the map up actually in a second here. All right, there's the map. As you can see, they have not progressed much further. They have progressed further, but not much further than where they were last time. Last time they had just this red area outside of Crimea. They have now extended that. They are as you can tell, and what we said, their primary goal, while they do want to get to the river, they've abandoned some of their attempt to get to the river here. This would obviously give them supply from Crimea really easily, but what they have to do is connect it with Donbass, because Donbass is this other region that, even though they're not in yet, at least to the last of my understanding, they can go in at any time. It's rebel-controlled. The rebels are friendly to them, so they can take it. So if they can connect those two, it makes it a lot easier to take that whole section of Ukraine. You can tell they also have made some reasonable progress in the north and the northeast, but they apparently had expected to easily have taken Kiev by this point, and they have not done that. This is the city of Kiev. There appears to be a staging area down here that they do have that is getting supplied. I believe that is, I forget if that's, there's at least one airport in there that they did have control of, but they have since lost. And it looks like they're trying to surround Kiev and arguably have done it. They've taken some areas outside of it. And have been staging from those areas, but haven't really successfully gotten in. This is that northern column that came in. They came in along this road here. They have taken all of this area, but they have been unable to get any further than that. So the thinking is he's going to have, if he's going to win this.
Zelensky not moving?
No, he's not moving, and in fact, he's shooting with everybody else. And we had reported earlier. Basically, we offered Zelensky as much as we could to help him evacuate Kiev, and he said, "No, I don't need to evacuate Kiev. I don't need rides. I need bullets.
I need ammunition, not a ride."
Ammunition, not a ride.
That is a fucking rock star drop right there.
So, yeah, that's where we are. I think the thinking is if Putin doesn't find a credible resolution to this in the next 24 to 48 hours, he is going to be in very real trouble, because he's already had members of parliament that had voted for this who are saying they did not vote for the murder of Ukrainian
What's that going to look
people.
like, though, Nick? Like, what would we as citizens look for in the news that demonstrates that Putin is feeling the pressure? Like,
It depends on
so in other words, like, what statements is he going to make that are going to be lies?
It depends on how far he goes before he decides to do this. Worst case scenario for him, 5-6 days from now, he doesn't wake up one morning, and unfortunately, he was the product of bad eating habits or whatever, and we're terribly sorry. This country's in mourning. We're going to pull back our soldiers so they can all mourn, and it's going to be like that. That's worst case scenario for him. Best case scenario, a day or two from now, he says, we have restored Russia's honor. We have saved Donbass. We have saved a great many lives. We've done a great thing that will be remembered for history. We will now withdraw because we actually love our Chechen brothers and sisters. And we will return if Donbass needs us. They always have an ally in us, and then pulls out completely from all of Ukraine, including Donbass. I think that's actually credible at this point, but that's still at least a day or two away. At least, but I mean, he's going to have to start to feel like maybe his life is in jeopardy, and he must be starting to feel that way now. And at a minimum, he's had enough resignations from at least cultural and political posts to realize that his control of the local media and the propaganda is not as tight as he thought it was. There are people who are openly in
that's
Russia.
what we were talking about last night.
Yeah.
He's using the playbook, or a strategy from the playbook of like 30 years ago, when there was only like 3 news networks that only had 3 broadcasts a day.
Yeah.
Like, you can lie and then cover it up when weeks later it's revealed that it's a lie. But nowadays, it was predicted what he was going to say. He was called out when he said it in real time. And now it's just like everybody knows it's a lie, and he's pretending like it's not. It's delusional. It looks like he is delusional.
More Russians know it's a lie than I had anticipated. That's true, but I think a number still do believe it. There's a lot of true loyalists, and there's a lot of, Russia's pride was really hurt by the end of the Cold War, and they felt that they lost it. And they, I think what they like about Putin is they like about Putin's kind of the same thing a lot of people who were inspired by Trump liked about Trump, which was that he sort of made them feel like, make America great again. We're missing the old days, and this is the guy who understands that and will get it back at any and all costs. And those people are going to believe that he's doing everything he says he's doing, regardless of what the media says, because he's also running around saying fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news. But there are enough people now who are seeing it and believing it that he's really got a serious problem there, and he needs them to believe it. And if they don't, I was making this point earlier. In the U.S. or in most capitalist countries, when you're fired, what that means is you get a severance package. You get, if you're lucky, you get some unemployment insurance. You maybe get some health care for an extended period of time. In Russia, when you're fired, you get a bullet to the back of the head. So he's in the position where people are talking about how much longer he should stay, and it's not enough that we're talking. And it's not going to be a revolution. He's not going to face a revolution. Somebody will kill him before there's a revolution. But he's in trouble, and he knows it, and he has to finish this, and he has to finish it quick. And there's no credible way for him to do that at this point. So people are thinking at this point.
Is that why you think he's throwing around the nuclear option?
I don't know, and I don't know how much. I mean, if he's been throwing it around heavily, that's news to me. I haven't heard that. I know he's been
Not heavily. He hinted at it. like a day or two ago.
Yeah,
He was like, keep in mind that Russia is a nuclear power kind of thing.
Yes, but that was to us. That wasn't to Ukraine. That was to us to stay out of it. And Turkey, Germany, and a bunch of other countries are refusing to stay out of it entirely anymore. They're sending weapons. His biggest, and we discussed this last night too, the biggest problem the Ukrainians have right now is they only have so many anti-aircraft weapons, and they only have, they can probably keep fighting with guns for a while, but in terms of anti-tank, anti-aircraft, they have a very limited supply. So right now, Germany said, nope, we're going to supply you guys. A number of countries are supplying them right now, and so it's really about holding out until Putin really cannot sustain this anymore, and it's credible to think that now there may be that end in sight. The economic damage of the sanctions is more than anybody else had anticipated, again, because they really were willing to pull the trigger on SWIFT. Russia.
Has he gone through his war chest? Apparently he has quite a war chest set up.
He does, but it is dependent on him being able to access at least some money. And again, the money, it's not about him, it's about the oligarchs. And they're aware that they're going to be stuck with this regardless. This is, by the way, looks like one Ukrainian defensive fighter engaging a Russian MiG. But again, the question is, they're not really trying to target him. They're trying to target the people around him who would be willing to off him to end this. And, I don't know what kind of war chest he's got. I do know. So Anonymous declared war on him. We played their message to him, which was rather aggressive. And we do know that the Russian news site, I forget what it is, it's the same one that YouTube has finally taken down. Has finally demonetized and is not airing in Ukraine. Their website went down. There are reports of other significant failures, including with the broadcast television. I don't think we should put that out because we can't confirm any of that. And it sounds great, and it would be nice if it's happening, and I believe Anonymous is capable of it, but none of those things mean it's actually happening. So we're gonna take a look at that. They've been banned from. Oh, okay. So, and then the other biggie is, well, they were supposed to. They were preparing to launch another rocket, and they're very proud of the fact they know what Sputnik is. They remember Sputnik, and they also remember the time of Sputnik, and they want to go back to that, not because they want to be terrifying the rest of the world, but because they remember when they were winning the space race. And the U.S. ostensibly won that by putting a man on the moon. So they want to get back into the space program, but they no longer can supply their rockets because they don't have, they're not getting the components they need from the West. And so they had to now delay their last launch, and it's delayed indefinitely, and they're saying they can't do it until... Now, this was the MiG that broke up, landed on an apartment building. I think there were no casualties in that, but there were fires for quite some time. And we'll show you, there's another one. We'll show you the refinery that was hit, and apparently is still burning, to the best of my understanding. So the question is, what's he going to do now? The thinking is he's going to do one of two things. He's going to slow this down until the casualties are down to a minimum, and then he's going to withdraw and find some excuse saying mission accomplished and bail. We've seen that happen before. We've seen that be successfully done in the West, even when we have.
But again, with the analogy of this being ripped out of the pages of the old school strategy book, the consequences of it. Right? It's not going to be the same consequences as they would be when, again, there's only like 3 news stations. And there's only like 3 broadcasts a day, right? Like the consequences, of course, to the countries that interact with that country, the consequences are just as dire. But now there's legitimate social global shame on Russia for having essentially flexed so hard, casually thrown out the nuclear option, it not working, and them having to make excuses for retreating. I mean, they look like little bitches in that situation.
I think they will, and I think the other problem that we pointed out, I had been looking at China a little differently. We had on Pat Lowinger last night, and he had some interesting takes on China, and he pointed out this thing, which is China has actually been reasonably friendly to Ukraine. And China doesn't actually specifically have any love for Russia, but they're willing to help Russia out because they can make Russia pay through the nose. So Russia can, but here's the problem too, which is even though Russia can go through Ukraine, if they're knocked out of SWIFT, even though Russia can go through China, if they're knocked out of SWIFT, that makes that a lot harder. But the thinking is that rather than maybe take advantage of this and make Russia pay through the nose to get around these sanctions, what they may do is take this opportunity now, if Russia is in fact overextended, to take territories that are sparse territories and aren't really worth getting into a huge fight over, but nonetheless are contested and China believes belongs to them, take them and take them now, because what's Putin going to do? And if Putin has figured this out, and if this really happens, he's going to be in extraordinarily big trouble because he is now weakening the country and no means of. I think I told you before. I think there's this mindset over there in a way that doesn't exist in the U.S. Though, what have you done for me lately? And he's a victim of his own success in helping Trump get elected, which I think very credibly he did, because Hillary lost by only about 2,000 votes in certain key districts. Where if the districts had flipped, the the Electoral College would have gone differently and should have won. She won the popular vote regardless, but should have won the Electoral College vote with just about 2,000 votes in the right place. So the question is it credible that Russian meddling and interference, which we know for a fact happened, and we know benefited Trump far more than Hillary? This is a bridge that was taken out. The civilians still need to use this bridge, so they are jumping across the chasm and just walking across as the ones who are evacuating are trying to just go through this bridge here. Was the Russian interference sufficient to flip roughly 2,000 votes in key areas? This is just a car that's got a camera, and it's about to come under artillery fire. I think it's approaching checkpoint that's a Russian-held city up ahead, and I don't think the driver's aware of that. He's now being shot at. So... At any rate, he's been able to sell it to the Russians that he's the one who installed Trump, and Trump was his puppet, and they've been all thrilled. But once Trump is gone, it's like, okay, you had that victory. Now what? What have you done for me lately? And I think this was designed to really bolster his credibility, and it's backfiring dramatically. I don't know what he's going to do going forward. Yeah, it's a much more quid pro quo. Well, you got to realize too. It's a different culture. I almost got shot when I was over there for failing to bribe a customs official, which I didn't realize was an offense you could get shot for, but apparently it is. All right, so I'm going to quickly check. Is there anything in the live chat? Is there any questions that we
No, there's some comments. People are. Well, so Zandring is in there, and he's commandeering the idea that capitalism is an economic model, not a political system. And he's posted it twice, and each time he's posted it, I have put it up on the screen because people are not necessarily arguing, or they're certainly critiquing, though, that statement. So there's some liveliness in the side chat, but there's no specific questions, it seems. People are agreeing that Russia looks bad. Seriously miscalculated the reaction. So everybody's kind of... it makes you wonder. It makes me wonder. If we're all agreeing on how it looks, are we seeing it accurately?
I think that's fair. We also came up with we found one other piece of interesting information. It looks like now U.S. intelligence is reporting that the FSB, which is the Russian intelligence service, actually was trying to gauge Ukrainian dissatisfaction with their government, and the dissatisfaction was very high. But they read the data wrong, which you, of all people, I think Mouty could understand, because reading the data when you do a psychological survey or any kind of, you gotta make sure it says what you think it does. And this is that once again this armored vehicle just goes out and just drives right over a civilian car, just targets a civilian car. Again, the driver was fine. We'll see that from another angle. And we can do it with audio, but at this point, since it's all going to be Russian or Ukrainian, I think most people aren't going to understand it. At any rate, I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So they were doing multiple surveys secretly of Ukrainian sentiment towards their own government, and the consensus was it was rather poor, which is probably true. But the problem is this wasn't a referendum on being able to elect their own leader. This wasn't a referendum on the Ukrainian way of life. It was a referendum on they didn't necessarily like the current leader they had in power and had objections to him. Doesn't mean they wanted to be back in Russia. Putin read this as, hey, they're dissatisfied with the government. They should be perfectly willing to they won't put up much of a resistance, and it turns out they're putting up one hell of a resistance. They've also managed to mobilize essentially a huge civilian militia, and people are signing up by the thousands to fight. So we don't know how effective that is. We don't have any numbers on that, but we do know that right now morale actually remains really rather high. And as long as that happens, and it appears Putin is trying to break morale. If they surrender, if they quit, he's done. He's out of this. And I think right now he wants to extricate himself from this. But how to do it without looking, as you pointed out, I mean, he's going to... Yeah, the ways, and Commander McMillan had said this yesterday, which is even going into this, he had backed himself into a corner because he kept thinking that, and this is what you had said too also about the world's changed. He kept thinking that the false flag with the school bombing, for example, where he claimed that a Ukrainian school was actually a Russian school that had been shelled by Ukrainians, and then later said, well, okay, it wasn't, but it was a Donbass school. It wasn't that either. It was a Ukrainian school hit by Donbass rebels, and the Ukrainians had, within an hour, had cameras there, and they said, no, this is the school, here's the street address, anybody who wants to can come by. This isn't Russia. Nobody hit Russia, we're not trying to hit Russia. And so he had several false flags that he had planned and attempted to do, did not work, and so he ended up going the way he did. But at this point, everything, he hasn't managed to maintain the, for lack of a better word, narrative that he had wanted to use, and he hasn't been able to
finish your thought.
Hasn't been able to keep as much of a lockdown on the perception of his own people from this. So at this point, and I had mentioned this before, the crematoriums behind there, the consensus seems to be that the reason he's got the crematoriums with each unit is so that they don't have to bring the bodies back. In the U.S., that's what usually does us in for morale. You see the bodies coming back from Vietnam, you see the bodies coming back from, and it makes it easier to actually tell what the toll is in terms of human life. Putin's incinerating the bodies of his own soldiers out there so he doesn't have to bring them back. And that makes it easier to hide the actual losses, especially when they're not really allowed to get together and start trying to tabulate these things. And any news agency that thinks that's bold enough to think that they're independent enough to do that without there being consequences is going to be in serious trouble. But it looks like he's losing that kind of control.
So there is a question in the side chat. It's from President Wednesday. Here's a question, or Wednesday. Here's a question. How likely is it, because it's President Sunday and this is Wednesday, so I got him confused. Here's a question. How likely is it that we'll see a wide-scale conflict or a possible world war? Would that only happen if China tries to take back some territories, or only if Putin never backs down? What's your take on that?
I don't think China entering or taking advantage of this is going to cause us any particular problem. I don't think it's going to result in any kind of world war. The closest we have to worry about in a world war at this point is if he succeeds in taking all of Ukraine, which is looking less and less likely. But that was his goal. That was his original goal. We learned that when he landed on Odessa. The only reason to take Odessa, he has to destroy Odessa. Or he has to get it out off of the Ukrainian side because they can stage from there and they can attack and harass from the sea from there. So he has to take it off their side. He either blows it up, which is the easiest thing to do, or he takes it. He lands amphibious troops and paratroopers there, and then he can stage from there. But he can't stage from there until after he's well halfway past the river into the west. So there's no reason to take Odessa unless he plans on going past the river and significantly past the river, which means he's planning on taking the whole country. So he wanted to take the whole country. He would then end up with troops lining up and he was probably going to take Moldova. So then he's got troops lined up against Romania, and Poland, which are NATO states. And then you've got the start of another Cold War with Russian and American troops through NATO aiming their guns at each other. At this point, it looks like, unless there's an utter collapse of the Ukrainian defense forces, which we aren't anticipating, unless there is a complete collapse of those forces, they are starting to at least get resupplied. That we are finding new ways to sanction Putin and really put him in a hurt locker, and he's got his own problems at home. And it looks like Anonymous really is actually giving them genuine difficulties. So that notwithstanding, as long as he is incapable of getting to the Romanian border, I think we're going to be okay. If he gets to the Romanian border, the chances of a Cold War goes up to 80%. The chances of actual World War III are still, I think, reasonably low. So my take on it is we're probably, knock on wood, I think World War III is probably reasonably off the table unless somebody, unless he really decides he's willing to burn it all rather than just lose. I don't think he's that kind of guy. He's a psychopath, but he's not that kind of guy. So unless he makes some crazy decision like that, or unless something happens that does trigger Article 5 of NATO, I don't think we're looking at World War III. We might be looking at a Cold War, but I think the chances of that go down as time passes on this, because I think it's getting harder for him to maintain that position. If he can maintain it, then that's what's going to happen. I don't think he can maintain it. So that's my read. I'm not an expert.
I like the optimism. So admittedly, Nick, I got to get going soon, but I fully expect that the show is going to continue and that you're going to have way more information than could possibly be gathered in the amount of time that you have available. But unfortunately, my available time is coming to a close. But I want to thank you for doing this. I keep telling Shannon every day. I was like, I can't believe how much I learned just by hanging out with like smarter people than me. That's what these opportunities are. With that said, I'm going to say goodnight. Go ahead.
The way I know you're completely full of shit is that's how I know you're smart, at least as smart as everyone else, because he's sitting there going like, they're all smarter than me. Yeah, Marty brings it when he just sits back and listens, which is smart too, and he's a good guy. But anyways, please continue.
All right, I'm out of here. Freaking crazy wackaloon.
Have a good
Everybody,
Thank you.
Listen to everything that Nick says, and at the same time, don't listen to anything that Nick says. That's your challenge for the night. All
right. Thank you so much, Marty. Have a good one.
All right, take care. Have a good one, everyone.
All right, that was Christopher Mowdy, a frequent guest host. We appreciate him coming down here. That, by the way, that you see below is the oil pipeline that was hit and has been just sort of pulsating a glowing fire throughout the night, which strikes, has been actually really freaking people out because at first they weren't sure if it was like a nuclear glow or what the hell that was. But, all right, let me... We've got Mowdy there. Actually, I could probably just bring the shield down on Mowdy because I'm not sure that anybody's. But yeah, no, Mowdy's a good guy. We're lucky to have him, and believe me, he's as smart as everybody else. But he one of the other ways in which he's smart is he sits back and listens a lot more. I'd do better in life if I learned that lesson. But going forward, thank you, Mowdy, and thank you everyone else who's been so. Let's see. I had a few other things in the rundown, but honestly, things have just been getting so crazy that we end up, I start doing a rundown, and then things just go crazy. I mean, right now, what we know is Putin is going to have to end this, and have to end this reasonably quickly. He cannot afford a Vietnam. Now, obviously, on some level, comparing this to Vietnam is utterly insane because we were there for years. But this will, in a very compact way, could end up being his Vietnam, and he's at this point fully aware of it. So the question is, how does he extricate himself? He has used these delays. He has spun that into we've been deliberately going slowly to give negotiation a chance to work. He's full of shit, at least according to military people who are looking at this, saying no, he's really trying, and he's getting his ass handed to him, which is, by the way, surprising everybody. And it's also not true in the sense that he has not been making any overtures for any kind of negotiation, and Ukraine has repeatedly asked for negotiations, and they've even contacted Israel and asked if Israel would mediate. Israel agreed. Russia will not sit at the table, so he's utterly full of shit. He is just saying that to spin the fact that they are losing. This is, by the way, a missile that was fired from a Russian, I think it was a Russian MiG, just went right by a house. You can see the house shake with the audio. You can actually hear the missile just go right by the home. So this is, it's a little shocking to see how much suffering is occurring, really that I can tell, satiate his own ego. Ukraine used to be part of Russia. And Russia let it and a bunch of other countries go. Why? They didn't have the economic ability to hold on to them. And it would be a war to try to hold on to them. And they said, well, we let you go. It's better for everybody. And now they have the economic ability to hold on to them. So they're sitting there crying over spilt milk and saying, well, you still really belong to Russia. There's a great meme, I think it's in the Discord, of two Americans, ostensibly a man and a woman, sitting there watching TV, and some guy sitting there saying, well, I guess I understand, Ukraine was in fact part of Russia. And then the wife's sitting there going, yeah, so was Alaska. They gave it up, and I understand that they want it back, but that's really not the way things work. There's no take-backsies in business or foreign politics. So that's really what this is about, and it looks like he really overextended and greatly miscalculated how people were going to see this. So, there's a question of, can this be won? I think the answer is yes. I think it's not easy. I think we have been putting up, have been stepping up. By we, I mean the international community, not NATO per se. NATO hasn't done anything and probably can't. NATO states individually maybe can, not NATO. We've been increasing supplies. They're the ones who are going to have to die in this. It's not us, but we're supplying them, and that's better than nothing. We are doing everything we can and taking some significant economic hits to try to stop Russia. We're doing this, I hope, in large part because we want to do the right thing, and we recognize this, the right thing. We're also doing this because we know if he succeeds in taking this, he will be to Romania, and he probably will not stop. He'll stop for a short while. When I say he won't stop, I don't mean he's just going to steamroll right into Poland and into Romania, but those will be next. He is doing this really out of Hitler's playbook. Hitler, if memory serves, took 1/3 of Czechoslovakia, then took another third. He took the first third. If I recall, I'm just sort of kind of winging this. If I recall, he took the first third on the grounds that they were all native German speakers and would rather be in Germany, which was mostly true. It doesn't mean he gets a third of it, but they're like, okay, fine, we'll let you get away with it. And he was allowed to get away with it, very similar in the way that Russia got away with taking Crimea. Then he took the next third. I sort of forget what his argument was for doing that, but it was, ostensibly something that could kind of be justified. And then by the time it was done, he was like, well, the remains of Czechoslovakia can't function by itself, so as a humanitarian thing, I'm taking all of Czechoslovakia. That's sort of my recollection of it, but it's been a while since I've looked, but it's just time after time, if he was allowed to continue and to proceed, Russia needs to be stopped here. But how do you do it without invoking Article 5? How do you do it without a war between NATO and Russia, which is going to be World War III and will likely, on a long enough time scale, end in the deployment of nuclear weapons? So far, it appears we're doing that, and as long as we continue to escalate the economic sanctions, despite the costs to us, I think it's a benefit to everybody long term. It's nice to see we're not kicking the can down the road this time, because that's what it looked like early on. But I think if the Ukrainians can hold out long enough, there is a chance they're going to get away with it, with most of the country still intact. And then they're going to have to rebuild. I did hear it suggested. I forget where. But I heard it suggested that Ukrainians after this are gonna feel kind of defeated anyway. I don't think so. I think if you repel an invasion from one of the strongest powers on the planet, and if you're Ukraine, you're going to be more proud in your country and more proud in your government than you've ever been. And you're going to be more proud in your fellow citizens. And I think the next 2 years after this is going to be a startling comeback. I think they're going to rebuild. I think they're going to rebuild quickly. And I think they're going to also really focus on their alliances. I'm not going to say that means this is a good thing for Ukraine. It's not. but I think they're going to come out stronger for it, and I think they're going to come out with a greater appreciation for what they've got. So I'm cautiously optimistic that there's a way out of this that sees most of Ukraine intact. But the first step of that plan is they have to get shot at for a while, and they are going to be the only ones getting shot at. And they're going to have to fight viciously for a while, and they're going to have to sacrifice a lot of lives. That's the only way out of this for them. At least that's what I see. Anyone who disagrees or wants to, or, hey, Discord is up, the live chat's up. In fact, I should check the live chat. Yeah, he's trying to get them to give up, and it looks like he's trying to demoralize them. It looks like now there has been a submission to the War Crimes Tribunal. Ukraine has said that they have already committed war crimes. They've documented some of the attacks on civilians. They've also documented, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten. So one of the problems is I've been trying to work from memory a bit more than I probably should under normal circumstances. My memory's not quite that bad, but low sleep and multiple streams and trying to keep up with everything, I'm relying on a memory that isn't going to operate as it should under normal circumstances. So I apologize. I haven't been, for the next show, I will be documenting things better so that I can read from a list instead of just from memory. Oh yeah, I'll remember all the individual sanctions one by one. Yeah, Nick, you do that. So, make the oligarch. Yeah, that's the goal. The oligarchs don't like him. The question was, should we, make, or it was really, make the oligarchs oust Putin? Not a bad plan. And actually, now that Mountie's gone, I can probably just, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start posting these on because believe it or not, I do sometimes listen to advice, especially when it's good. And I do. I'm stubborn and I'm slow to change, like most people. But all right, bingo. So here's a question: make the oligarchs oust Putin. Not a bad plan. Better than the U.S. or EU. Exactly. That's exactly right. And I'm actually kind of proud of that plan, despite me not being proud of some actions that the U.S. has taken, and I've made those crystal clear. And every empire before the United States, going back before history, really, going back to the first tribes of man. If you want to see what the biggest indicator is of a fall of an empire of some kind, it's usually, and you can measure it economically. One of the things that does it is when the economic disparity between the highs and the lows gets too high. That happened in Rome. That happened in France. You see that happen, you're going to see a revolution, and a country's going to fall. We've exceeded the percentage of disparity that can be a indicator of that. We've exceeded it, and historically, it's not a bad indicator. But if you want to talk culturally, what is the best indicator that a empire is about to fall? It's the idea that they can do no wrong. It's when they start thinking they can do no wrong, and the reason is because it's not because that arrogance, and it is arrogance, and it's a sense of self-entitlement that all of us are interested in having in one way or another, and we all do. Somebody comes up to me and says, hey, Nick, I heard that there was something about Ukraine and Russia and all this other stuff. I've been studying a bit about it. I'll bet you I know more than you do. I'm like, yeah. Okay, sense of entitlement, right? I'm the guy who's been studying it. Okay, so we all feel that way. We all get that way. But the problem is that's when your leaders start, lying to you and making, getting away with, atrocities, and you refuse to look at it because you don't want to admit that your country isn't, this perfect country. We're the number one arms exporter on the planet. We export more death than any other country on the planet. I'm not proud of that. And there are countries that are pissed at us about that, and the citizens of Saudi Arabia in particular, because we are the only reason the royal house of Saud can stay in power, because we sell them what they need to oppress their people and to murder their people. We sit there and say, we're going to go after Saddam Hussein because he's a tyrant. There are worse tyrants, like the royal house of Saud. But it turns out the royal house of Saud has veto power on the OPEC Council. And they like to use that pretty liberally when it comes to the U.S. That's how we funded the economic boom of the 90s. It wasn't Clinton. It was OPEC veto power being used favorably towards us. Well, everybody knows it. Saudis know it. That's why most of the 9/11 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. Well, they weren't from Iraq. Why are the Saudi citizens so upset at us that they're willing to do that? And there's religious reasons, too. But when bin Laden declared that he was going to come out and get the U.S., it wasn't primarily religious reasons. And he published a manifesto and explained his reasons quite clearly. Now, if you say maybe we should try to at least understand those reasons, if for no other reason than every military advisor on the planet said you can't win unless you understand your enemy. Well, no, that's to give sympathy to the terrorists. Okay, that kind of attitude is going to cause us to get our ass handed to us more times than not. And we can only suffer so many losses and get shit wrong so often. The dollar isn't ordained by God to be the world reserve trading currency. We're not ordained by God to be the greatest country in the world. And if we want to have that title and end up keeping that title, we have to act better. And that means holding ourselves accountable and understanding what our leaders are doing in our name. And we don't do that. Most people don't even realize that Fidel Castro was put into power by the U.S., you know? The weapons, the chemical weapons that Saddam Hussein used to gas his own people, any idea where those came from? I know where they came from. If you don't, maybe you should understand what your government is doing in your name. It is your government. There are elected officials. So all this to say, I get worried about where the U.S. is because we refuse to accept that we make sometimes very serious and profound mistakes. And I'll tell you, it's kind of unfortunate when a country can't admit its own mistakes. We sit there and talk about Germany should admit its mistakes, and it should. But then when they say, well, do Americans want to admit that they stole Texas in an engineered war against Mexico? Wow, that's not what happened. That's what happened. That's absolutely what happened. That's not really up for grabs. And it doesn't mean that this is a terrible country because it's a human thing. But at any rate, now I'm probably going off the rails. I do think there was a very specific reason why I brought that up. Something about the U.S. and projection of power. But I've spaced it. I'm probably getting a little tired. So if we want to maintain any presence on the world stage, we're going to have to admit we make mistakes. We're going to have to own up to those mistakes. And I think other countries are more impressed with you if you own up to those mistakes rather than say, which seems to be the party line for America nowadays. And I am proud of this country. I think there's a lot to be proud of. But I get less and less proud when we don't acknowledge our own sins. You know, the notion that we should bury Abu Ghraib because it would comfort our enemies and give them tools to attack us. Well, first of all, so does burying it, because you can't bury something like that. And then when it gets discovered, you buried it. Now you're in even a worse hole. But all that notwithstanding, you get more credit for admitting when you do mistakes like that. And it seems to me to be against the values that we say we stand for if we're going to have a prison that tortures and rapes 14-year-old boys. And then, just wipe that shit off. Everybody who's covered up crimes in their country is like, well, things will be worse if we are honest about it. We're not the first ones to say that. No, we thought America had values. And anyways, at least here, I honestly, I think I got onto this. Maybe someone in the live chat can remember how I got onto this. It had something to do with... there is one. I think I actually got there, believe it or not, from ousting the oligarchs. U.S. intelligence got this one very right, and they said, "Now what we really need to do is target the people around Putin." I taught a class once early when I was teaching, and there was one kid who was hilarious. Actually, he was really funny. He was the class clown, but he made teaching utterly impossible. He brought all education in the class to a grinding halt, and he was good enough to do it that there was no easy way to deal with him. And if you ejected him from the class, sent him to detention, you'd lose control of the whole class and see you as being, authoritarian and yada yada yada. So I was trying to figure out what to do, and then I realized, in general, thought of as a no-no, but I was just like, okay. So here's what we're going to do. Every time he tells a joke that everybody laughs at, everybody here stays 5 minutes late. Except him. 1 minute late. He gets to go 1 minute early. Oh my God, he didn't see the consequences of this one right away. And so he just starts telling jokes, and everybody laughed at his first two. I said, okay, everyone's staying another 2 minutes late. He can leave another 2 minutes early. There's 10 minutes in the class, so if he tells 10 more jokes, he can leave anytime he wants. And then he made another joke, and as everyone realized I was dead serious, ooh, they got pissed. Well, why was I doing this? Well, he wasn't trying to impress me. He didn't care if he impressed me. In fact, he was trying to upset me. But he was trying to impress his fellow classmates. So I was sitting there. Here's this analogy from an old substitute teacher, I think, at the time. Here was an analogy of how I basically actually gave him more benefits. I tempted him with benefits and said, you get to go a minute early every time you say something that gets everyone to laugh. But they stay a minute late, and they did the math on that, and they're like, as funny as you are, I'm not staying late in this class and getting late to the next one. One of them said, too, will you write us a slip? I was like, no. You're going to have to talk to your next teacher and explain why you don't deserve detention for being 5 minutes late. That got their attention, and it worked, and he never acted up in class ever again. That's what we're doing to Putin. Well, we're not going to sanction him too hard, although we actually are, but it's the oligarchs. So I think that was actually a stroke of genius, and I'm kind of pleased that we were able to come up with that. All right. Yeah, what was it? I think it was, I wanted to say, well, I almost said Lao Tzu, but that's the Taoist philosopher, Sun Tzu, who said that, if you know your enemy better than he knows you, you cannot help but win. And there's a lot to that. So Putin has lost touch, I think, with reality. And he's lost touch with his own people. And we talked about that. It looks like what we're hearing is that he's been holed up. You can't even see him without 2 weeks in quarantine because he's afraid he's going to get COVID. And I've noticed this. And I actually didn't finish asking, because I think I asked Marty this question a while back, because it's a psychological question. It seems to me, and this is just a pattern I've noticed, this is just anecdote, so take it for what it's worth. It seems to me that the more power people amass of any kind, the richer people get, the more political power they amass, the more they actually start to get paranoid. And I suspect it's because the more power you have, the more people who actually are out to get you, the more life becomes intolerant of your mistakes. If you make a mistake and your net worth is $1,000, well, how bad can any of your mistakes really be? If your net worth is $1 billion, when Elon Musk says or does something stupid, that shit goes everywhere across the world. The world has a lot fewer tolerances, or a lot less tolerance for Elon Musk making mistakes. So he gets put under pressure, and he ends up, I think, starting to become a little paranoid. And my suspicion is it doesn't happen to everybody, but to most people, the more power you amass, the more paranoid you become, because you become hypersensitive to any kind of mistake, because you have to. That's the only way to survive in those positions. I suspect Putin has become so hyper, it's like COVID might get him, so he's got to... So I think that's what it is. I don't think it's senility. I think that's... Oh, well, that's awfully nice. I did. I taught a little differently. And I have one of the cards. A student of mine sent me a handwritten card about a year ago. They just graduated college, and it was a very nice card. And I do miss teaching. Not sure I'd ever go back to it. The hardest part was dealing with parents and or school administrations. And the amount of what I never really anticipated was how cutthroat it was, even with other teachers, because there's this assumption of a net loss. If you, as a teacher, do particularly well, other teachers feel like it makes them look bad, and on occasion it can. If you have, if there are two siblings, you're in a department, you're teaching one history class, and another teacher's teaching the same history class, and there are two siblings, a male and one female, and another brother sister. They're in the classes. And they go home, and one of them's clearly learning faster than the other. That can have some consequences. So, it's nobody's fault. It's just it makes it hard to. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean I love this one. All right, and I think at this point I'm just continuing on. What we're looking at, just because people had asked this, and I think this is fair. What are we looking at? We're looking at. Putin is now going to have to get a win out of this, and he has to get it quickly. If he can't, he's going to have to find a credible way to exit that makes him look like it's a victory. We have seen this time and time and time again. Don't anybody think he can't do it. That was a mission accomplished, and we've done it even in states with a better media than him. And the truth is, while I think many of his people might want to hold him accountable for this, right now, if he stops it, people will be so happy in the immediate short term that he may actually get a small short-term gain from this, but it will be a net loss. He will lose a lot of power if he bails on this, but he's going to, at this rate, lose more if he stays in. So he's trying to figure out what to do. My suspicion is his exit strategy, if he chooses to take one, and I think that's becoming more and more likely, his exit strategy is going to be to tell people, we've saved Donbass. We've saved many lives. There was intense fighting. The Ukrainians didn't understand that we're brothers and sisters, and we were going to help the Donbass region for, humanitarian aid, and we would never invade Crimea, and we're sorry Ukraine. We're sorry that they felt that that's what it was, but our soldiers know that's not what it was. The international community knows that that's not what it was, and we have now accomplished our mission, and the soldiers from whom we should all, as Russians, be proud. These soldiers are heroes, and thank you all for your work, and let's come home. My suspicion is that's what he's going to do. My suspicion is a number of people will be just so glad to have this over that they'll say, fine, take it. Take a victory walk, just get the fuck out. That ain't going to last long, and people will remember this, and he's going to have a problem. But my suspicion is that's his easiest way out now. And he's a psychopath and a ruthless son of a bitch who likes to murder people with his bare hands. And again, I keep bringing that up because that's important. It takes a special kind of human being to actually deliberately and knowingly strangle the life out of someone, and he's done that. We know he's done that because he was an assassin for the KGB. But he's pragmatic. And all he wants is to stay alive and stay in power. He will get killed, murder, destroy anything in his way. He doesn't care. And I don't think he sees a difference between a 5-year-old girl and a 55-year-old guy with a AK-47 aimed at him. I don't think he can distinguish between the two. I don't think he cares. I really don't. But he wants to keep his power, and he's overextended himself. He's made himself vulnerable to China. He's got insane problems. If we're reading this correctly, it's impossible to know for certain. It's impossible to know for certain because we do the fog of war, as it were. But I think that's right, and I think we have a read on that. So if that's true, he's going to look for a way out. He has two possible ways out. One, start figuring out how to do the political solution I just did. Two, murder everything in Kiev. The problem with number two is there's going to be some backlash to it, and he's already facing more backlash than he anticipated from the international community. So he has to sit there and say, what's the likelihood that he can do this and make it look like he wasn't trying to commit genocide and he was trying to minimize losses, and that may not be technically possible. That may be beyond anybody's capacity. If he thinks he can't do it, then he's lost, and he may have some handle on that. Otherwise, he's going to hit Kiev, and he's going to hit it hard. He has to end this. If he thinks he's going to lose no matter what, unless he can take Kiev and say, look, I'm going to lose if I leave, so yep, things could get really bad if I take Kiev, and I may face a firing squad if I try to, but I'm going to lose anyway, so let's try it. Then that's his last-ditch effort. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping that ain't it. We're assuming that that's going to be it at this point. But we don't know. We'll see. So I think that's what we're looking at. All right, so let me hit the live chat one last time. Should the Russian networks be hacked and show what's actually going on, then he might not have that option. I'm not as optimistic as you on that. I think it could happen that kind of hack happens, and Anonymous seems to have said they're going to deliver on that. But he's been conditioning them, and this is something that I think it was Macmillan, it may have been Lowinger had said, was he does one other thing. He spreads a lot of misinformation, and at first I had sort of been under the laboring under the impression that he was doing this just to control his people, and directly, actually, not as much as you might think. He's doing it for the sake of there being misinformation, not to misdirect the enemy, but to get it so that they don't trust any source, and that's not stupid. You got a cost associated with that, which means they won't trust you when you need them to, but it also means they won't trust your enemy when your enemy needs them to. So I think he has set up a lot of time being able to credibly say everybody's lying to you, even me. You can't believe anybody, and so Russians will believe what they want to believe. What do they want to believe? The same thing every citizen of every country wants to believe, that their country's the best in the world and that they voted for the right guy, or that they're supporting the right guy and the right guy. That's what everybody wants to believe. The people who hate Trump now the most, in some cases, are the ones who really wanted to believe that he was going to be able to do something different. That kind of disappointment is what that spawns hatred more than most things. So I think if all of this footage. And by the way, I've seen, as we've been processing footage to put on the show, and as we've been processing and trying to figure out what's credible and what's not, the number of times I've seen on a stream somebody saying, oh, this is all fake. This is all fake. And I think some of it's trolling. I think some of it's legit. I think there are people there who just think this whole thing is fake. They think that we're, a wag the dog kind of situation, fake war, fake all this stuff. I think that's even technically possible. I don't think that's what's going on. I think that would be truly remarkable. But a lot of people in Russia, I think, do think that. So I don't know that airing this. The one thing you can't fake is the bodies, right? The one thing you can't fake is the bodies. If you have a son that went to war and his body comes back, you cannot fake that. What you can do is burn the bodies. If you burn the bodies aren't coming back. And then you come back and you say, well, we don't know what happened to him. Those nasty Ukrainians may have him as a POW. Hold out hope and keep supporting me because I'm going to try to get him back. They have crematoriums following all the major units here. Why? I think it's his biggest weakness is he can't hide the bodies. Well, actually, now he can, right? That's his biggest weakness. So people won't believe the media. People won't, but they'll believe the dead bodies. So he's doing something about that. That's my look. Yep. RT is. I'm surprised they're still carrying it. I'm surprised YouTube. So the question was, let me put this up here. There'll be a lot fewer YouTube channels connected with RT. YouTube has demonetized them and is saying they're, what's interesting is YouTube said they would not promote them nearly as heavily. Nearly as heavily? Am I the only one who was thinking that not promoting them at all was the low bar in this? Not the high bar, the low bar. And the fact that they were still actually monetized in advance of the sanctions or after the sanctions. So I don't know. And I don't think it's because YouTube's like an evil corporation. I just think they didn't give a shit and they weren't thinking about it. And then somebody pointed out, do you realize that you have a sanctioned company that you're sending money to? And like, oh, we should probably stop doing that. But yeah. Oh, we'll see. Okay, Wednesday. Thank you. So, I don't know. I think I answered that question. Let me try to answer a few more, and then I think we'll call it a night. Again, we're still anticipating heavy shelling, but heavy shelling started. What appears to be a major attack started and then was, quote, repelled. And I say, quote, repelled because while they are good, if Russia put a full 150,000 people into Kiev, they're not going to stop it. I think if the Ukrainian resistance were if it weren't this good, they'd be in Kiev. But the reality is he doesn't seem to be trying his hardest right now. And I don't know if that's because he's marshaling his resources. We know they have supply chain problems. That's what I said earlier. They were planning on this being less than a week. They don't have supplies in there for a week, and they can't get supplies in because bridges keep blowing up. They don't have air superiority. There is still a Ukrainian Air Force, much to everybody's shock. So they don't have the proper supplies for an extended campaign, and they can't get them right now. So it's a clusterfuck if you're a Russian soldier out there right now. All right, so the question here is, yeah, they're state funded, but the problem is the state's having problems. All right, I'm sorry. I think I put the question up. Let me see if I can read the question right off the dash. I cannot. Okay, so Wednesday asks, where do you see the Ukrainian leadership going when this is finished? Maybe 9/11? Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Again, we had an opinion posited that, well, everyone's going to lose faith in their government for allowing this to happen. No, I think Zelensky is going to be able to walk on water after this. And I think also, and I hope, my guess is he's going to put that to good use and not just like as in for himself. I think he's going to sit there and say, I don't ever want this to happen again. So he's going to go out and he's going to say, okay, world, what can we do to make sure this never happens again? And he's going to help Russia, Ukraine rebuild. And they are going to be so proud of having what in their mind is, and not far from the truth, repelled a superpower. They have a tremendous amount to be proud of, and I think they're going to know that. They're going to be proud of their neighbors. They're going to be proud of their families. I think anybody who's died in this is going to be a hero, and that's my expectation at this point. That's maybe a little bit of a high bar, but I think they'll clear it. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to be. I think he's going to be beloved more than Bush was even after 9/11. And we came together after 9/11. They're going to come together more because, as bad as 9/11 was for us, this was a huge existential threat. 9/11 shattered our worldview and made us feel a lot more vulnerable, but was incredibly about to end the United States. The Ukraine is existentially a threat. And they have to be proud of their own people who have been lining up in droves to go out and throw themselves in front of Russian tanks, because you're not going to actually stop them if they're not going to stop. So I think, anyways, I hope that answers the question. I think that answers the question. Sun Tzu, Art of War. That is correct. Thank you. Yeah. Sun Tzu and Lao Tzu, two very different people. Very different people. All right. So I think that's about it. I think... and Zelensky's already said, yeah, he's already Russian target number one. They want him dead. There are reports. He is reporting that there's been an assassination attempt on his life. There's no independent verification of that. But it wouldn't shock me when we do know there were snipers down there. But I don't know how they could get close I don't know what... They've got special forces down there. CIA is probably down there. Somebody had said that. And no way, no, CIA is probably down there. Pat said that, and I think he's right. I think CIA is down there because that's how we get intelligence. We have to get intelligence, so we have CIA operatives or pretending to be Ukrainians and just watching and reporting back. So, yeah, I think that's it. I hope he survives too. He has said he's going to take up arms, and I believe him. And I think this is very hard for him because what I've found is that people who enter politics for very good reasons have those good reasons beaten out of them reasonably quickly, and there may be a kernel of that left when they mature into a full politician. But in reality, they've realized most of politics is getting down there in the mud with the pigs and trying to wrestle something good out of the whole mess. And there are very few politicians who seem to come out not significantly less jaded than they went in. Obama became more jaded, but his personality didn't seem to fundamentally change. But that's rare. I think Zelensky is there because he loves this country. That's what I think. I may be romanticizing him, so take it with a grain of salt. Remember, Mouty said, "Don't believe a word I say." Also, remember, he prefaced that by saying, "Believe everything I say." So we'll. If I had a choice in it, listen to the preface, ignore the follow-up, but leave it to Mouty to fuck me and my audience that way. Go after Mouty, get pissed at him. Mouty's the problem. I think we can credibly say Mouty's the problem just across whatever's bugging you, Mouty's the cause. I think we're just going to say that going forward. Do you have an ingrown toenail? It's Mouty. But I do think that, yeah, that's true. I'm going to put that one up because, yeah, that's unfortunately true. I think after this, my hope is that he doesn't get corrupted by a sudden sense, an influx of power and appreciation. He may. That often happens, even to the best people. My hope is it doesn't happen to him, and my hope is so much has been sacrificed that he's going to make it his life's mission to make sure this never happens again. And if he does, he's going to have the full unanimous support of Ukraine's in a way he hasn't had it before, short of Donbass. That's what he's going to have. And there was a footage that we have here of a single man basically facing off with a tank. And he's got what looks like a light anti-tank weapon, but he hasn't even, he's slung over his shoulder. He's just casually walking through husks of burning vehicles to just sort of get to the tank, but he's not even making an effort to hide himself. And there's a guy, and you can hear on the audio, somebody says, I swear to God, if I get out of this, I will never speak Russian again. For Americans, it's a little awkward or weird because we only have one national language, and most Americans can't even think, why would you bother learning two? Well, in Europe, everybody knows at least two, and it's pretty common. And in Ukraine, everybody speaks Russian and Ukrainian. And the languages are reasonably similar, so if you speak one, you can usually fumble your way through the other. But, yeah, nobody... They ain't going to be speaking it after this, and I think the national pride is going to be up, and I think that's what we're going to see. So to reiterate and try to wrap this up with what I said earlier, I think there's a credible survival scenario for them, but right now that involves staying alive as long as possible. It doesn't involve us coming in and helping them when they'll get weapons and armor, but they're there. And it doesn't involve them expelling the Russians, because they will not be able to do that. It involves them staying alive as long as possible and inflicting maximum casualties so that Russia loses its will to fight. In Vietnam, think about this. In Vietnam, we lost 1 soldier for every 10 VC. 1 soldier for every 10 VC. And we lost the will to fight before they did. That's insane. That's what they're facing now. And frankly, that I can tell, the sources we have that look reasonably credible, it's hard to tell, they're killing more Russians than Russians are killing of them, at least of the army, of the civilians. That's not the case. So, yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. I'm going to quickly check the Discord. I don't think I missed anything. I've got a whole bunch of messages. That's never a good sign. So let me check those. It's probably messages I've been ignoring for 20 minutes. So, okay, I think most of that we can stand by. If it looks like credibly like there's going to be a serious shelling of Kiev, if it looks like there's any significant breaking news, we will cut to that. But at present, I do expect there's going to be some attacks, but not enough that it's going to warrant breaking news. We'll go to breaking if we're available. We'll go to breaking at any time if anything big happens. Right now, I'm expecting there's going to be light attacks around Kiev. The consensus is there's going to be heavy attacks. I don't think he's there yet. We'll see. And if it looks like they're making a serious push to Kiev to finally take it, and I'll show you the map. Let's look at this map one more time here. Ta-da. I mean, as you can see, they can credibly move into Kiev for the most part anytime they want to, and this is Kiev right here. And from what I can tell, less than 3 miles, or about 3 miles from the city limits. That's the Russian. That's where the Russians have control. So, and they've been hitting Kiev. They can easily hit it with artillery fire. We have the image earlier of the apartment complex being hit. So they can, but they haven't moved in yet. At least fully. They've tried several times. They've been repelled. They haven't done. I mean, they've got ostensibly 150 million around there. I think they know if they do try, since the civilians are now armed and willing to die for this, they're going to end up with a bloodbath. And as much as public sentiment is against them now, and world sentiment is against them now, they're going to lose everything they got left. Turkey has notably not weighed in on this. That's a sign that Turkey's pissed at them but doesn't want to say it. Because if Turkey was for them, Turkey would come out and say, yeah, they're right. They won't do that. So Turkey probably thinks they're wrong but doesn't want to burn the bridges. So how possible do you think it is that Putin could stay? I'm incapable of gauging that. I don't know. I have no way of even guessing. I don't know. I keep thinking to myself, there's got to be a way to just guess, make an educated guess. No, I don't understand the man well enough to do that. Either is possible, and it depends on what he thinks. He has to make calculations based on imperfect information on what's the best outcome for him. At this point, withdrawing gets him an outcome that's terrible, but is manageable. Winning gets him the best outcome, but that may not even be possible. And so the question is, how possible does he think he is, which is also based on whether he's been lied to by his generals, who have some incentive to lie, because if one of his generals say, we failed to take this objective, guess who's next in front of the firing squad? So I don't know what he knows. I don't know what he's thinking. Don't know. I can't even ballpark this. All right. Thank you all for joining us. So, like I said, we'll go to breaking if we have anything else that's big and hopefully legit. And barring that, I appreciate your support. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help. And also, since we don't always know when we're streaming, This is one of those channels, if you really do want to get the content when it's important, like, subscribe, and go to the bell and turn on all notifications, because if you don't do that, you're not going to know when we're streaming, and we usually, we're not doing, at least for the next couple of weeks, we're not going to be doing our regularly scheduled programming. It's just going to be breaking news and a rundown every night. But that floats. I mean, if it looks like Kiev is about to be attacked, we're actually going to delay the rundown to see if they get attacked, and then we can put that in. It floats. So like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and that's the only way to really be sure if you want to keep up. And it also helps us out because it boosts the algorithm. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to the mods. I'll be in the Discord a little bit. I won't be in VC, I think. I may be later tonight, but I'll certainly be in the Discord for a little bit if people want to ask questions, if people want to engage. All our sources, all our information is down there. Thank you all to those of you who have supported us. Thank you to those of you who have been plugging us and helping us get the word out. And it, I think, also encourages us to do better, because we always want to be putting our best foot forward. So thank you to everybody who's helped in every way that they have. We will see you guys hopefully no sooner than tomorrow at the same time. Have a good night.